Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It's Thursday. We are in the book of Hosea, chapter 11, verses 5 through 7 says, "But since my people refuse to return to me, they will return to Egypt and will be forced to serve Assyria. War will swirl through their cities. Their enemies will crash through their gates. They will destroy them, trapping them in their own evil plans. For my people are determined to desert me. They call me the Most High, but they don't truly honor me." So he says they say it with their mouth, but they don't live it out. I have two questions that I kind of want to dive in today. One, what are some ways we dishonor God? Some ways that might not match what we say. So we say one thing and do something else, and they're dishonoring to God. Um, so I'll give a statistic. Something like 80% of America in most surveys say they're Christian. But I'm not sure 80% of America lives a Christ-like life.
Yeah.
No, I am sure 80% of America doesn't. So what are some ways that we say that and maybe don't live it out? What are some of the most challenging ways?
Would definitely say the way that we spend our time during the week. Like I said in a previous podcast, our calendars, a lot of times if you look at your calendar and you look at your checkbook, you can kind of tell where a part of your spiritual health is.
What's a checkbook?
Checkbook. Yeah. It's the thing before the credit card. But yeah, if you looked at those things there, you can kind of gauge where your health is at. But I'd say some of the other things that we learn, but it's kind of hard to do, is, or we don't prioritize it a lot of times, is spending time developing relationships with people to hopefully convey the gospel to them. It's very easy to be busy all week long, and you've actually talked about that in some of your sermons, where the common response from people these days is busy, 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 instead of being good. But we can neglect that.
I think forgiveness is one that I've seen a lot, that there are people that say Christian, but that one person that did something wrong to them, they'll never forgive or something. I've heard and seen that in action multiple times in my life, where there's that one person that they just can't let go. They can't let go of that hurt or that pain that they caused them, which in a lot of ways it's understandable that, this person did something horrific, but that's something that Jesus spoke very firmly about, forgiveness. And to me, that's kind of scary when you hear somebody saying that, like, I can forgive people, but except for this person.
Yeah. And I'll even hear people say they have forgiven somebody, but man, their actions don't bear it out. Like they still have a bitterness, a harshness. It doesn't matter what, and it affects their life negatively. That's the thing. It just affects their life so negatively. There's nothing, like, there are some people in the world that I know when I get around them, at some point a particular subject is going to come up, because they can't escape it. It eats at them all the time, and it's a very, very, very tough, a tough thing. At some of the places, some of the things that I think we say and don't do mostly have to do with people. I love everybody. We say that because that's right. That's the Christian thing to say, right? I love everybody. But we don't treat everyone with the love of Christ. And I don't think and I don't have it in front of me to be able to tell you which one that is, but I don't think it's meant for you to affectionately love everybody. But
Please don't affectionately love everybody. Got some Gomer issues there.
Or you'll be Gomer, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you do have to treat people with respect and understanding and compassion. And I think we say we love everybody, but I have my moments where I'm frustrated, particularly if I'm on the phone with someone who is supposed to be helping me with an issue, and I know they can, but they won't.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two different things. When somebody says I can't, then you can't. But if you won't because A, B, and C, or because you just don't want to, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
Or you mentioned earlier this week left lane drivers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we say we love everybody, but living that out is somewhat of a challenge.
I think something that helps with that is understanding the other people. If there's certain people that you not necessarily don't love, but you just don't have a draw to, or you may avoid, I think understanding them, which requires building a form of relationship, helps out a lot on that. And then previously you were talking about forgiveness. That's a struggle, but something that I've told people in the past is because of some stuff that I've gone through is that forgiveness and reestablishing trust are not the same thing. To forgive somebody is basically just letting go of the judgment that you believe that they deserve. But it doesn't mean, and depending on the situation, it doesn't mean that you have to let them back into your life at that moment or anything. You do still need to rebuild trust depending on what has taken place. So that's helped me in a lot to know that I can release them of whatever it is that they did. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I need to go and like start up a relationship with them or start a business with them or anything like that.
As we read the minor prophets, we get such a short glimpse, a small glimpse into a book, a time of history. So it's good when we kind of take that and see what else is going on in the Bible. So Amos is kind of the contemporary of Hosea. They both were in the 8th century, both in the northern kingdom. And so we have Hosea, which talks about faithfulness to God, and Amos is kind of that counterpoint, talking about social justice, about how you treat people. And so I think it's important to kind of balance that this wasn't the only message from God that people were receiving. They were getting these messages about how they were treating. And Amos 5 says, I hate all your show and pretense. Instead, or away with your noisy hymns of praise. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Instead, I want to see a mighty flood of justice and endless river of righteous living. And I think that is what God was calling people to. The social justice is a big part of the faithfulness to God that we see in this time period.
Why do you think that word social justice causes so much heartburn in most evangelical circles?
I know lots of groups have their own hurt of social justice, but a lot of times it's different per. So to just simply label it as social justice, it's kind of hard to pin down because everybody feels like their particular group has some sort of injustice that needs to be reconciled.
Yeah, I think that's probably a hot button word. That's probably I I think it is. Oh goodness. Yeah. There's.
What are you scared of?
I think that they feel like a certain political side has taken that word and made it one of their posts, and so they almost have to sway against that or at least those words, because that might align them with the other side politically, I think is part of that, maybe.
I think something Chris said, I do think it's become politicized, and anything that becomes politicized, we feel like we've got to take one side or the
Right.
other, which I don't think Jesus would have done. My view of Jesus is sometimes he's extremely liberal and other times he's extremely conservative, and we want to be Christ-like, and so sometimes we're going to be both. You said, Chris, every group feels like they have some injustice.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are multiple things that cause us to struggle with injustice. I think that there becomes, and I would say, some resistance about some specific things comes from, do we treat people fairly, and does this become pushed on us as being normal or the norm, whatever that might be? And I don't want to name any particular things, because that's when we're going to get in. That's when we're going to get sideways today. I think what we have to learn to separate is treating people right is different, is separate from people living right. If that makes sense, So there may be groups who feel like they are treated unjustly, and they may be correct. We could think of times throughout history where people would have had certain inclinations or sins or whatever, and they would have been ostracized and mistreated.
Mm-hmm.
Mistreating people are different from saying this is something that everybody should be open to, or taught, or even accepted. Approval and acceptance are two different things. So I think that becomes the animal that we wrestle with. And I think what happens is there are two pieces to it. We don't know how to accept people without approving. So we think if we accept them, we have to approve of how they're living. And I think Jesus clearly gave us some examples of how to do that. Where the woman caught in the act of adultery, he didn't say, go and do it a few more times. His response was, go and sin no more.
Mm-hmm.
That was his response to her. But his response to them was, you should be treating her differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it becomes this twofold thing. And I think it does become a hot button issue, because we think that, all right, if I'm going to hang out with this person, or I'm going to accept this person, or I'm going to be kind to this person, people are going to think I'm okay with how they live. That wasn't Jesus' approach at all. Jesus' approach was, I'm going to be kind, but I'm also going to say, hey, go and sin no more. And I think that we've lost that art in the church. We've allowed words to become politicized and overused, so like, I think on this conversation with maybe Zach, even in the church, words like prosperity have become bad words, which I don't think they should. I mean, the Bible tells us God wants us to prosper. Now, what that looks like, does that mean we're going to all be billionaires? I think that's a misuse of scripture. But is prosper a good thing? Yes. Is it a scriptural thing? The answer is yes. But that word's been hijacked by a certain kind of church and certain kind of preacher, and now we're like, we can't talk about it, without them thinking we're one of them. And I just think we have to be careful about how we treat other people. And I think the number one place we dishonor God is saying we love everybody. we sure don't treat everybody that way, you know. And I think even in my relationship, the closest relationships I have, and that's always my argument with people. They're, you know, some things are left. Love is not confrontational. Well, sure it is. Yeah, it is in my house anyway. You know, there are times both ways. My wife has to say, "Hey, like that's ridiculous."
Yeah, anytime you have two people come together in any situation, you're not always going to agree on stuff.
Right. Well, in love, you have to. There has to be expectations where you say, you know, this isn't acceptable, but you still love them.
Yeah.
You know, you still in the relationship with them. And I think, you know, I think the church has to be careful to not let words like social justice and maybe there are other words we could use instead become hijacked words where we neglect our responsibility as believers, just because the Democrats or the Republicans use that, you know, terminology.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back tomorrow as we finish up our conversation around the book of Hosea.